This meeting of the Centennial School Board is called to order at 7:51 p.m. and a quorum is present. Thank you for your patience as we were getting things going. First up, let's see here. Let's take a look at the agenda. There are a few adjustments in the report section that we'll be looking at. So there will be no student report today, and we will be moving the budget update report above the first trimester report so that all of those folks here for the budget update report don't have to stay if they don't want to. Excellent. So with those adjustments, anything else to the agenda needed? Great. The agenda will run as stated. I think that's the one that we don't know. All right, so then introduction of guests, nothing for the day. Approval of minutes. The minutes draft has been posted in board book. Are there any corrections or amendments? Hearing none, I'll call for a motion.
Motion to approve the minutes from November 13th,
Second.
2024.
All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Nothing came through for public forum, is that correct? Excellent, thank you. Moving right along to reports. We'll jump right into budget report. Welcome, Director Southerton.
Wonderful to be with you all this evening. I will get this presentation queued up here just a moment. All right, so we are providing a report of the financial results for last school year, 23-24, as well as an update for the current school year, 24-25, and kind of looking forward into 25-26 as we launch budget season with the work session next month in January. So this is our agenda. We'll be discussing enrollment, revenue, and expenses primarily for last year and this year, because those are the largest impacts on the overall budget. This is a very detailed chart, and I'll just kind of walk you through it. ADM, or average daily membership, it has the largest influence on our budget, is the primary factor upon which we are funded. Average daily membership incorporates absences as well. So in the first column at the top of the chart, you'll see where we started with our student enrollment at the beginning of the year, middle of the year, and the end of the year. And then you'll see with absences what that translates to average daily membership, which again is what we're actually funded on. We're not funded on the number of students enrolled, but we're funded on the number of days that students attend. That's where the D in ADM comes from, is daily membership. And then lastly, in this chart on the far right, you see the weighted average daily membership, because Oregon Department of Education does provide additional funding for some conditions when students present with additional needs, such as students that are experiencing one or more disability or on an IEP plan, English language learners, poverty indicators, and others. So you'll see that we had a trend which is consistent with past years, which is we do start out at the beginning of the year with a higher enrollment than we end up. That's traditionally for numerous reasons, not the least of which are early graduation and people transferring out. And so that was a consistent trend all the way through, with the exception of the weights. The weights actually increased, as you see in this chart on the third column or fourth column over third row down, 6938. So with that, we received revenue that was in line with what we were expecting for the 23-24 school year, which was wonderful, because we all do our best forecasting and estimates as we go through the budget season, and we know life happens, and so when we end up really close to where we were expecting, that is a good news. Revenue came in at just under 77 million, as did expenses. You'll see the highlighted expenses of 76,994,019. That's highlighted because in the copy that was updated to board book, there was a typo. It read 76,944,019, and so I just want to call that attention to those of you that may have viewed the report earlier. There was a minor change there. Local revenue came in over what was expected, and so we will have to pay that back for the state this year. You'll recall that I had provided that in my year-end budget update in, I believe, May of the previous school year, that we essentially were prepaid from the state, and that's how equalization works. We estimate what local revenue will be. If it comes in under, the state will come alongside the following year and give you more. If it comes in higher, the state takes back some of their support that they provided. So we've incorporated that in our budget model. So, but it's to be noted. Beginning this year, current enrollment in October was 5,550 students. The ADM is to be determined, as is the weights. So we need time to happen and get the first ODE report on what the actual weight will be with attendance. And we know that it will be lower than 5550, right? Because we don't, as much as we strive, we don't have perfect attendance, and we wish, we want every student to be here every day. And we know that, again, life happens, and sometimes with their absences. So that will be influenced. Now, the challenge that we have is this is 89 students lower than what we were forecasting, and that's what you see on the second row, red font here, which has a monetary impact to the district of nearly $1 million. So just wanting to be transparent and have that awareness that all the time, when our enrollment goes down by nearly 100 students, that has a major impact on our budget. Unfortunately, we are not able to reduce expenses because we have lower enrollment, because the distribution of students is still such that we're not going to be able to reduce any classes or something like that, or major expenses, even though we do have fewer students. I think I've heard others say students don't come in nice packs of 25, and we can't have perfect even classes as much as we would love to. We do recognize that while we will have lower funding, our expenses will largely probably come in line with what we budgeted for and forecasted, which means a higher deficit potentially than what we had budgeted. So the change there is highlighted on the bottom row, which is at $874,000. So we will evaluate that as the year progresses, and then certainly look for optional spending if there's any that we can reduce in the mid-cycle here. And we know that thankfully we're at a decent point with our ending fund balance that we should be able to absorb that one-time hit. We just want to make sure that we understand going forward that we're not out of the woods yet on declining enrollment. We're still seeing a minor declining of enrollment, and so we'll need to forecast and account for that during the budget process. Looking forward, this is a new graphic as well from the one that was loaded in board book on Friday. Sorry, Missy, you asked, and so this is representing, there's clouds on the horizon, right? You can see some sun breaks there. You can see, is the sun starting to come out, or are the clouds rolling in? It's to be determined. We're in a new biennium. The legislature is determining the funding. We anticipate embarking on shared advocacy for the funding that we need to provide students with a quality education in Oregon, and we hope that our legislative partners will come alongside with the money that's needed to provide that. So please don't interpret this as much more than we're a little bit of, we don't know exactly how next year is going to go. We do know that funding has been historically inadequate in Oregon by every measure that's been done on a consistent, holistic basis, the quality education model, for example, and others. And so that's resulted in Centennial spending into deficit the last couple of years, and we know that's not sustainable. So that's looking forward as we get into the budget process. We're really going to probably have to make some hard decisions if the legislature doesn't come alongside with realistic or sufficient, I guess, is the most appropriate term for funding. We also know going into 25-26 that we're going to have some additional costs. In a typical year, we see average roll-up costs, which is a term you're familiar with that I've used before, which is for doing everything the same, not reducing services. But if we do everything next year that we did this year, the additional costs are expected to be about 6%. You see that with step increases, cost of living increases, and supply and vendor charges. A couple of things about next year that are uncertain or additional considerations are we are in, this is a bargaining year for a licensed group, and so it's uncertain what the cost of living adjustment may be or what impacts will happen with steps, because every topic is possibly a subject of bargaining. So, and we may end up with a COLA that's slightly higher than 3%. So this may be a roll-up year that's higher than 6% this year. We'll have to see. We've also been put on notice from the Oregon Public Employee Retirement System, or PERS, that across the board, school districts that don't have side accounts will receive an increase of 1.5 to 2% in their PERS costs across the board. And so that is the same effect as a COLA, a cost of living increase, because it's on every dollar of payroll. You're paying an additional 1.5 or 2%, right? And so effectiveness is not any more money for our staff, but additional cost to the district. Folks with side accounts, sadly, are seeing even larger increases. So in this case, it was a benefit to us to not have a side account as a district. And I can get into that at a future meeting if people want to discuss the possibility of PERS. Again, the funding level at the state has not been determined, so that's another question mark or something we just really have to take. Although our work will start in earnest with priorities in January, we don't know what we're working with exactly, so it'll be based on estimates at that time. So again, some clouds, but hopefully the sun will come out and legislature and shared advocacy will be effective, and we'll be able to provide all the supports that our students deserve and need and deserve. So, reminder for the full committee, which is the board and the budget committee members. This is the timeline that we've adopted. So in January, we have the work session to establish some priorities, particularly important if we have to reduce services. So that will be a very important meeting that we have in January, because it will shape what we bring forward to you all and as a proposed budget in April, which will be the first budget meeting. And then May will be the second budget meeting, and hopefully approval and adoption of the budget in June. I welcome any questions you may have.
Could you go back to some of those first slides? Maybe it was the second slide when we were talking about the student count being down. Do we have, I know that there's a differential for our special needs students, which is there as well. But do we have like a cost per student, the average student? And how do you deal with that, ever-changing number?
Yeah, what we have is a dollar spent per student, right? Because that is the cost. It's what we're spending. So if you take the aggregated general fund number, for example, which is the $78 million this year, and divide by the 5,500 students, then you get the dollars spent per student. Obviously, that's not equally distributed, right? There's some students that need additional supports and interventions and additional, small groups or one-to-one nursing or whatever, variety of issues, right? And some of those are spent in support of students, the foundation upon which education happens. So that might be in maintenance, and it might be in custodial, and it might be other things, right, that happen. But that's how a lot of metrics are used across states. They say, like, on a per capita basis, what does Oregon spend to educate students? What do we spend in the Portland metro area versus rural Oregon, with maybe lower cost of living and lower wages, but they maybe get the same amount of money from the state, and you can kind of look at those different things. Is that helpful?
It does, and is it anything that you see any changes in that as they're talking about changes in school funding? Certainly you talk about that. More money
Yeah.
coming per student.
The talk that I hear is not good
Okay.
about that. I don't know if Superintendent Owens wants to offer anything, but I'll kick things off. Through the pandemic, Oregon's seen a decline in students, right, across the state. Centennial is not unique, unfortunately. We've seen students opt out. We've seen students go to online platforms out of the public system. We've seen homeschooling. We've seen people go to work at the high school level rather than continue on, just a variety of things, right? Overall, across the board, we've seen approximately 30 to 40,000 students decline in overall number of students that are enrolled every single year in the state of Oregon, while support has continued at the, at the state level. And so what that happens is the denominator's gotten smaller, so the amount per student has gone up. And so the argument is, hey, we should get some credit for the fact that 30,000 students aren't going to school anymore. You should need less money, not more money. And on the surface, that maybe sounds right. And then you look at the exceptional cost increases that have happened. You look at students don't come in nice neat packages of 25, and okay, that's great. We're down 90 students across 9 schools and 12 grade levels, and 101 elementary classrooms. Like, what's that really equal to? 0.3 of a student per class. I can't cut a teacher. It's so. The question is a good one, and we also know that students are presenting with more acute needs. More students are presenting with more acute needs now than they have in the past as well. So the need hasn't declined, while maybe when you think about the absolute number of students attending might have declined in Oregon. So is that helpful?
It's helpful, and I appreciate it being said, and I would hope we would get some help when we are asked as board members to talk with legislators. And they say, well, you have fewer students, and it's that simple logic of fewer students, you get less.
Yeah.
We have to have an answer for that, and I need practice on that part of it, is how to say what you just said. Simply.
I'll work on that. I'll work on some
I'm
talking
having
points.
some really bad feedback, but I want to talk. So I think that one of the things that I guess I didn't really fully understand with the ADM is, just turn your volume on, is that absences are subtracted. And so even if someone is sick for a day, that is money that is subtracted from the money that we're getting. However, it doesn't cost us any less to keep the teachers employed, to keep the food coming. Like, we don't know how many people are going to be sick. That just doesn't make any sense. Am I incorrect? I'm like trying to figure this out and understand. Like, we still have to provide the services regardless. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't have a question, thank you.
Well, I'll ask a question then
Please.
around that. And this is maybe more for James. What are you hearing about talking about or fixing the school funding formula? Because every once in a while you hear about that at the legislature. Is that a buzz item for this legislature coming up?
Yeah, and I'll speak to that a little bit in the superintendent's report as well, and Director Southerton may have some insights beyond what I have, but that's one of the things in the governor's proposed budget is a fix, and I can't speak, I'm not going to pretend to know the mechanics of the current service level calculation, and that's one of the things in the governor's proposed budget is to incorporate the roll-up costs more effectively than have been done previously, because I think a little bit of money each biennium bleeds out. And so what's perceived to be the current service level actually isn't. It goes down by a margin each time. Director Southerton, can you speak to current service level calculation? Because the net looks like it may be approximately $1 billion increase biennium over biennium in terms of dollar to dollar. And there's some mechanics in there that maybe Director Southerton can speak to.
Some of the mechanics include the previous form, or what they're proposing changing is the look-back area was 20 years, for example, on formulas. And we could say, okay, that took into consideration the Great Recession, it took into consideration recession earlier, into some zero COLA years. That's not the environment we're in now. So that's probably the largest potential change that they're considering making. They're also talking about adding in got a green light, but it's not much. So the look back period, making it more recent, taking into consideration some of the highs and the lows, and it is an average, but having it not be a 20-year look back that had exceptionally low spikes in it, like the Great Recession and the previous recessions that we had in consideration. So that's part of the major change. And then there's talk about more emphasis on including the adjustments for PERS. So for example, that 2% across the board increase that's happening with PERS, if that's a mandate, there's no discretion in that whether or not we pay that, right? And so making sure that they incorporate that, because they have the same information that we do right now. We know what's going to happen in PERS. And so I think Stacy Michelson, who shared an update with our board a couple of months back, also said, though, that, we are the largest expense in the state of Oregon. So it is difficult because even getting, a 6% increase takes a disproportionate bite out of the pie from potentially other services. So it is something the state needs to look at as a holistic way on how we're funding education, right? So, and maybe making sure that that's, maybe it's a zero-based budgeting to begin with, where it's like, okay, we need to do education, we need to do life safety, we need to do other things, and then we do the nice-to-haves as a state, because it seems like we want to do everything. So.
All right. Okay, let's see here, my agenda. Ooh, next up, we're gonna do Roadmap 27 first trimester report with Dr. Katsuda.
Great, and as she is queuing up here, I'll just say that as a part of our strategic plan, we have periodic reporting to the school board and community as far as how that is going. So that is what you'll be seeing here this evening. And for Director Andrews in particular, but for all of us, we'll have a dashboard to be able to debut. So that'll be an exciting component this evening as well. So without stealing any more of Dr. Katsuda's potential thunder, I'll go ahead and turn it over to her.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to provide you with the first trimester, the fall update to Roadmap 27. I'm going to start by talking about the central point of the update, which is our excellence targets. Excellence targets are goals and metrics established to monitor our growth towards our strategic plan, Roadmap 27, through input and feedback by various improvement planning groups involved in the development of the plan. Targets also incorporate stretch goals that the district set and required integrated plan submitted to ODE, and that provides us with more focus to our work, right? So you should have received, and it'll be important because I'm not sure you'll be able to see the numbers that well on the projected screen here. I'm hoping everyone received a hard copy of the, oh, excellent, okay, wonderful. All right, so you'll see here, excellence targets were based on measures from the strategic plan. They're prioritized based on our equity audit findings, reflect our stretch goals, as I just mentioned, that we had submitted to ODE as part of our integrated plan, and really highlight our desire to be transparent and have some accountability built into our work and improvement. As you see here, this slide is centered, shows you that we have 4 priority actions. They're listed as 5 goals, and we've consolidated 2 goals into 1 academic goal. So across the district, you might hear people say 4 goals. Breaking out our academic goal between grade levels pre-K through 3 and grade levels 4 through 12. I'll speak more to that in a bit, which makes 5 goals, right? Goal 1 and 4 focused on academics with a priority focus on literacy and ELA. You'll see here reflected, and we have some indicators beneath Goal 1 and Goal 4. and growth and attainment of grade level standards, and percentage of students who participate and successfully complete advanced coursework, right? So that's the academic goal. Goal number 2 is focused on well-being and inclusion, and across the district, we often refer to that as our engagement goal. And I'll show you some metrics related to that around students' perceptions and experiences of safety, inclusion, and belonging, discipline, disproportionality, and regular attendance. And then the third goal we have is student empowerment and voice. We often refer to that in our district as our engagement goal, right? And under that, I'll show you some metrics reflected of students' perceptions regards to being engaged in classrooms as reflected in our survey, and students' perceptions and their experiences of voice, empowerment, and opportunity to contribute to change in the classroom as reflected in our survey responses as well. All right. As you can see, I'm going to highlight a couple things just for a little bit of context, very briefly. As you can see in this table, data-informed goal setting happens in somewhat of a nested fashion across the district, meaning that goal setting and action plans are happening at the district level. They're connected to and aligned to goal setting that happens at the school level, as in school improvement planning or school improvement plans, which in turn are connected to growth and professional practice goals that teachers and licensed staff across the district set in their direct work with students. And believe that this concept that all of our goals are connected and aligned provides us with a clear focused direction across the district and focus to our work. Right? And that's important because I don't know that even in our district that we readily recognize that goal setting really is a collective process across the district. Also for context in the update, it's important for you to know that we, in a similar fashion, are engaging in professional learning across the district. Again, at the district level, starting with the kickoff of this year, we support district-wide equity module professional learning across the district, which then happens at the school level as well. We set up the systems for learning and structure systems for learning, everything from providing supports to standards-based instruction to the work that we're engaged in setting up a data assessment and data system. And then at the district level, we also engage in professional learning in our trimester data summits, which I believe you've heard a lot about. We engage in similar processes with administrators in our administrator meeting. They're also engaged in professional learning that then they take to their building and facilitate at the building level as well. Performance Fact it has been providing school level support through site visits and administrator coaching. Right? You'll see here, let me make sure I'm doing the right thing. And at the school level, again, similar to what's happening at the district level and with administrators, school staff are engaged in weekly professional learning communities or PLCs. Every month, a school has an implementation work session where they look at core or tier 1 level data. So some of the data we'll be looking at today. They're engaged in equity module PD and even outside of the specific strategic plan work, ongoing core professional learning around critical instructional practices. Right? So again, professional learning across district is a critical part, and we believe a critical lever in changing practice. So it's very much worth noting in this update. Here are the monitoring measures. These were discussed with all the various groups that supported the development of Roadmap 27 and were mentioned earlier. So we have 10 measures that we are utilizing in our excellence targets that we'll be reviewing tonight, directly connected to the work across the district, at the district level, school level, and that, yeah, we'll leave it at that. Again, we believe that inquiry-based cycles of improvement are a significant lever to changing practice. We have that happening at all levels in our district. Like I said earlier, district-wide trimester data summits with school leadership teams, our monthly administrator meetings, and monthly student observations that are conducted by administrators across the district support inquiry, looking at that data and inquiry and improving practice. We have, again, monthly implementation staff meetings, or Tier 1 staff meetings in all schools. They're engaged in looking at data, critically examining and improving practice. And then all school staff are engaged in weekly school-level professional learning communities. So these improvement cycles are happening at every level on a frequent basis across the district in a cadence. Are there any questions about these before we jump to the metrics? Sure.
Especially before we jump to the metrics, could you go back a slide? So you've got two measures that appear to be the same. Is it because it's different grade levels? There's the reading, math, and then in parentheses, STAR benchmark, and then you drop down a few bullets and it says STAR reading, math, parentheses, benchmark.
You know what? That's a duplication. Sorry.
Is
That's
it?
That's
Okay.
that's
All
an
right.
accident. Yep.
Okay. So then
Yeah.
maybe there aren't 10, or now, actually there'd be 8. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Measures?
we have, all of those measures are, I don't know how many that would be. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. And then, I guess for level setting, before we get into the benchmark, it says here STAR,
Mhm.
and then we get to the dashboard.
Mhm.
It's got different measures, so why STAR? What is
Oh,
that, and what is the
Perfect.
difference from
I'm
the
so
other
glad you're
ones?
asking that. I'm going to touch upon that when we get to the metrics.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, that's a
Good.
great question. Yeah. Any other questions? All righty. All right. I'll also say, we've been using the term data dashboard, and I'm going to suggest and advise us to move away from that, because in the school sense of what a data dashboard is, or at the district level, it's a system in which someone will enter inputs and basically query for reports specific to data. So you might, a data dashboard would be a flexible data report production system where, and it really is much more interactive, where a user can get on and say, I want to have data for these particular student groups. You can go in and enter all the different kind of student groups you want data on, and it would spit out data for you. What we're providing is a data report by quarter. It's not really a dashboard. The dashboard is a little bit more interactive. So to avoid confusion, I'd like to kind of move away from this term data dashboard and really focus on the term excellence targets, which is more descriptive of what we're actually providing here. On this page, and it'll take you to the district website, which will show directly to the Roadmap 27 dashboard page. You'll have the overview of the strategic plan, and at the bottom here, integrated guidance, as I referenced earlier, the excellence targets. So if later on, if you prefer to see them or access them digitally, you have access to that. It's on the slide deck here, this webpage link. All right, so to get started, our first goal is building a strong foundation pre-K, which is described more explicitly by our collective district improvement planning teams, as each student in kindergarten through grade 3 will develop foundational academic and social emotional learning skills necessary for future success. As you can see here, there are 2 different measures presented. Oregon State Assessments, also referred to as OSAS, which is an acronym for Oregon Statewide Assessment System, and STAR. OSAS is offered once a year with a delayed outcome report, and really is a measure not only of the outcome, but provides us with data that then will inform district-wide systems, right? We are utilizing our benchmark measure called STAR for both ELA and math. This measure is administered every term, which is very different than OSATs, which is administered at the end of the year, and we often don't get the results of that data to the following school year. So with the goal that we're monitoring our progress, we've selected the benchmark assessment, which actually shows proficiency, the percentage of students who are proficient at grade level at this moment, which will be much more timely and provides us the feedback we need to continually work on improving practice. Whereas OSAS isn't that helpful in guiding us in continuous improvement throughout the school year.
That's what gets published.
That's what gets published, yes.
And that's how we get comparative quality.
So the OSAS report, OSAS outcome will be included in this when we get it for these grades, right? So, but again, it's a less frequent measure and it's not going to be informing our ongoing progress and work throughout the year. It really is more of a post academic proficiency report versus a ongoing sort of benchmark monitoring report. So we're using STAR, we're using OSAS, and you'll see that reflected here. OSAS will only show up once a year on this report.
Are you able to speak to the predictiveness or the comparability of those two assessments? When you sit them side by side, it looks like substantial improvement from the 28 to the 40%. And I can imagine there is comparability between the STAR assessment and OSAS, and I bet you if you ask the vendor, they would say that it's predictive. But are you able to speak anecdotally, or I see
Yeah.
Director Callahan
Yeah.
head shaking as well.
Yes, I would say STAR, like a lot of benchmark assessments, shows students' grade level proficiency aligned to grade level standards.
In this case, though, these are two different cohorts, right? The grade three, so.
These,
grade three from this-
these are two different cohorts.
yeah,
Yep.
So
So,
that could explain part of it, but then the predictive nature is also important. So if it's at 40% now, are we gonna see 40% in OSAS next spring? That's, yeah.
I mean, that would be the theory of action based on looking at our STAR assessments, saying that as we see students' percentage, the percentage of students at grade level proficiency, that should be somewhat reflective of what we would see in the end of the year state assessment at grade level. Yeah, yeah.
It'd be helpful if we had STAR from spring of 23. So we could do a STAR.
Yes,
So we're seeing the same information.
yes,
Like, I understand that OSAS is once a year and like, maybe not reflective of our continued work,
yeah,
but we should have the same data on both sides.
yes. Well, and every term that passes, we will include another bar there for comparison. So this is the beginning of our longitudinal data, so to speak, related to ELA and math for grade 3. So right now, we see one bar. By the end of the year, you'll see 3.
Well, so guess
For
what?
STAR.
I mean, my first assumption is, well, the excellence target is too low. I mean, look at this.
Mhm. Yeah. And I would say if we exceed it, I would still say that an excellence target of 45.6% proficiency should definitely be exceeded. That is our aspiration, right? So if we exceed it, and we just keep going. Yep. Yep.
This seems really low.
It does seem lowball, and I would say that we spend a lot of time discussing this in terms of alignment with the measures that we submitted to ODE, the stretch goals. And so, yeah,
But this was their recommendation too.
this was a recommendation, and this was the outcome of the target you see there is the outcome of the discussion and the work we engaged in around that.
But the question about what gets published statewide is,
The Oregon State Assessment.
that's the one.
Mhm.
So someone would have, if they really wanted to know about Centennial specific, there's this that's published, but you would come to our website to be able to say that look at, there's other data for you to consider,
Mhm.
which means it's another step other than the singular place that the Oregonian will report, or, that, so it paints a different picture. Internally, we may understand differently, but externally, you only have the one source of assessment that gets out to the public.
But this is I think that
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to move to the second goal. Supporting every student's well-being and inclusion means each student will feel safe, supported as a learner, and experience inclusive classrooms and school communities that nurture their sense of belonging. There are a number of ways to measure and monitor students' well-being and inclusion. We have two. Attendance, a more distal measure, some might call that a symptomatic measure, it's been shown to reflect student engagement, as well as student responses from our progress monitoring surveys that ask questions specifically connected to their perceptions of well-being and inclusion. Here you see the attendance rates, and then the next slide you'll see the survey questions, the results of the survey questions. Attendance rate columns here will be added. So right now you just see fall of this year. And again, winter and spring will be reflected here. Across the state, it is the trend that attendance tends to go down throughout the year, which might not be a surprise here. So it's our intent to keep persisting and working on the efforts in regards to engaging students and supporting students in attending school. Yes.
You have, I'm curious about, we're not splitting up middle school and high school. And I guess I'm curious a little bit as to why, for this, like, we have that data.
There are probably a number of theories of action. For our excellence targets, we're trying to keep this somewhat distilled and more simplified for the public. I'll say that when we get together every term in our data summit with our school leadership team, the data is disaggregated and it's looked at by level. And I think not that there's less value in sharing that information here, but I think what we're trying to do is portray a simpler data set for the public. And the other work really informs the practice, right? So.
As someone who loves data, I'm like, give me all the disaggregated.
I know.
Not our role.
Nope, yep. But the disaggregated data is put to use.
I love that.
Yeah. All right. So here's the second measure for supporting every student's well-being and inclusion. As you can see, you probably might be able to see it better on your hard copy there. These three questions were purposely selected from the comprehensive annual student survey to assess well-being and inclusion. As you can see, we see some growth for most questions, and we had a baseline from last year that we used to set our targets. There is an exception here in terms of responses that we've seen growth on. The question, my school is a welcoming place to be at the elementary level, went down 0.3, a third of a percent. Some might consider that flatlining when you have that many student surveys administered. A significant growth is reflected at the elementary and secondary for the question, I feel like I belong, with secondary exceeding the target of 59.7%. Yes. And again, I will say that it is in our, it is very much a part of our consciousness to exceed some of the targets that are, set 59.7. It'd be great to exceed that, and that's our intention, right? So.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Why are the secondary survey results so low? I mean, it's just over half the students are answering these surveys.
Are you talking about the survey?
The secondary
Percentages there?
student survey results,
Mhm.
56.6%.
Yeah.
So am I reading that right?
You
Like,
are reading
just-
that right.
Just over half the students are actually answering these surveys? Why is it so low?
It's not students answering the surveys, it's of the student survey responses, 59% responded with a positive there.
Oh, okay.
These percentages aren't indicative of the actual response rates, it's indicative of the students who responded in a positive fashion.
Okay, so 56.6 responded in a positive fashion. Okay, thank you. I
Yeah.
was thinking that it was only half the students that were actually answering the survey.
No. All All right, no other questions on that? I'm going to try to maintain a perky pace here. Next slide. Yes, because I don't see the clock. What is it, Thursday? Okay. So goal 3, centering student voice empowerment and leadership, defined as each student empowered to use their voice and exercise choice within their classroom and school communities. The survey question response rates you see are focused on engagement, monitored through the following 3 survey questions. I can learn almost anything if I try hard enough. I work hard to do my best in school, and I like going to school. As reflected in the percentages, we show growth in all responses at all levels, reaching toward our goal, with the exception of one question, I can learn almost anything if I try hard enough, which went down 0.6% at the elementary level and 0.1% at the secondary level. Yeah. Excellent. All right. No questions? I'll move
a good
on to
trend.
the
Perky
the
pace.
next one. All right. Second set here, students' perceptions and experiences of voice, empowerment, and opportunity to contribute to change. 3 questions reflected here. My teachers really listen to me when I talk to them. Adults in this school ask students how to make the school better, and my classes really make me think. Again, reflected in the percentages, we show growth in all responses at all levels, reaching toward our goal, with the exception of the item, my classes really make me think, which went down 3.9% at the secondary level. Mhm. All right. I'm going to keep going here.
Yep.
All right, goal 4, ensuring equitable access to high-quality academics, focused on English and language arts for grades 4 through 11 in this slide. Similar to the pre-K 3 ELA and math measures, we are monitoring growth towards grade level standards through STAR benchmarking measures, and will include OSAS in our examination annually. Here you see the percentage of students by grade who show grade level proficiency through the STAR ELA benchmark and grade 11 OSAS measure from spring of 2023. And again, the winter and spring STAR assessment measures will be included here, so we can see growth over time by trimester over this school year. What you're seeing here is the first measure, to some degree, somewhat of a baseline measure for the year.
I think it might be helpful to have a little bit of disaggregation, especially when it comes to talking about ensuring equitable access to high-quality academics. I might want to see this information based on some different demographics.
Mm-hmm.
To really understand, like, it's great to see the overall, but like, ensuring equitable access to me means that like all students are meeting the same.
Yeah.
Or we're striving to get all students at the same level.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this is
It's too broad, because
well, yeah.
equitable access doesn't highlight our various learners, our
But
diverse
I don't know
learners.
if that makes sense to other people too. I'm
Yeah.
curious. That's just one thing I noticed.
So you think the data doesn't show how accessible
How equitable the access is.
yes.
Yeah.
So like, this is just the summary of like all of the students.
Yes,
For it
the
to be-
aggregate.
For us to be able to ensure equitable access, I'd like to know like, where do our Latino
Yeah,
students?
emerging
stand?
bilingual students, et cetera.
Mhm.
So we could disaggregate that.
It may
And there
not-
might be a variety of ways we could do that. Yeah, we could do that. There is a number of ways we could disaggregate it, and the data could be very complex. So that's just something for us to consider.
It may not
be-
be, yeah, it may not
Be
be
curious as
everybody
to the ideas,
interested,
because
but-
Yeah, and some people might say, well, hey, you just aggregated it based on race. Why not income? Why not language? Why not? And then before you know it, like, there's so many ways we could slice the data, and that is an option. So it's something for us to consider
So,
further.
going along with what you'd said, but kind of from a different angle, is I've been thinking on all of these, I'd like to know, I guess I'm not exactly sure I want to know this, maybe, but I think I'd like to know the outliers, and where you're putting your emphasis. And I think that might get to that, and this would be in version, 2.0 or something like that. That might get to where you're going, is, okay, here we are. This is our report, not a dashboard, it's a report. And here are our focus areas, maybe not outliers, but focus areas, and it could be race, it could be income, it could be homelessness or not, or, it could be gender, it could be any of those things, because I'm assuming that you're using this volume of data to try to hone in on the areas that really need additional emphasis.
Yes, well, it's interesting you should say that, because we will have the school level improvement plans uploaded and available on the strategic plan website. And every school improvement plan, principals and their staff were asked to look at data and select focal groups of students. And those focal groups of students are the students they see who are most underserved. And in that, then they're monitoring the outcomes for those students and monitoring their growth throughout the year using a variety of measures, which is why we so heavily disaggregate it where we can in our system. So in our school improvement plans, and every school will have a different focal group or may have a different focal group. We're seeing some consistency across schools and levels for students selected, focal groups selected, right, or identified. But there are some distinct differences between some schools. For example, Oliver Middle School has a different focal group that's unique to them versus other schools. There's some, and so many of our schools have a focal group, an ELD, a focal group, student focal group that they're monitoring throughout the year, right, based on the outcomes, et cetera. So there may be a way to incorporate that or highlight information so that folks, if they're interested in that, could go to that. Go to improvement
I'm
plans?
struggling because I don't know if I'm comfortable enough to know that it's happening.
Mhm.
And then I'm thinking, okay, that's fine. Or if I want some examples or something, just to get to just a little bit of a lower layer on knowing what's going on and how we're really addressing this in a more pinpoint fashion. I don't need to know the pinpoints, but just having a little more confidence in that.
Yeah, I
regard.
think
I
that
don't
can
know.
be, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I would say let's take this back, and I'm open to feedback on that too, because the goal category implies that there's going to be some disaggregation that takes place because the results that you see on the screen are homogenized. You don't know how the results are affecting different groups of students and how those are contributing to that sum total. So naturally, if we're providing equitable access, to the point that you made earlier, we're going to want to see who is exceeding that, who is not exceeding that, and what are we doing to support students who aren't.
Yeah. No, these are great questions. And again, this is our first go at setting up these reports, and so as we look at ways we want to expand it or provide our community with more detailed information, we can look into that. So, yeah. Yeah, well, and that's part of the idea behind these reports is there's a saturation point for the average public viewer of data and what they know and understand about how to look at the data. So This reflects our math for grades 4 through 11. Again, you'll see here fall STAR results and 11th grade Oregon State Assessment results for math. All right, this excellent target shows the percentage of ninth graders on track to graduation. Again, just a reminder, on track to graduation means they have earned 6 credits by the end of the school year, and we're in the fall term, right? So if we were to split that out, if they've earned up to 2 credits at this point, they're somewhat on track, right? There is specific work being done at the ninth grade level at the high school. It's a critical transition year from middle school and often shows significant drop in engagement, growth, and achievement across traditionally structured school settings like Centennials. Research shows that critical bolstering of social and emotional and community building to establish inclusive environments of belonging and intentional efforts to connect learning across subject areas decreases sort of that cognitive load for students and increases relevance and students' capacity to focus. The high school is really working on improving supports and changes to the ninth grade program, looking at data through ninth grade teaming model, where teachers examine the impact on practice and make changes to improve their instructional practice and structures. So you see here so far, fall trimester shows 77.2% of our students at the ninth grade level are on track.
I'm sorry, I gotta say something about this. I'm assuming, and I'm gonna look at Maren, that every single one of those kids who are not on track is getting some kind of personal assistance and that it's gonna change.
Yeah, and maybe Marion can speak to this. He and I spoke earlier today in terms of some of the details in the ninth grade teaming model as they continue to work on improving that. Is designed for just that, is really looking at how students are doing at the ninth grade level and providing supports, but I'll let.
Yeah, you know, there are several parts of this. One of the things is actually the 8th to 9th grade transition. And so we've been bolstering up, and you probably have seen this if you've had students going through this. More of our students are going down, students are coming up, doing visits, they're mentoringship. You know, there's positive phone calls to make sure that the 8th grade to 9th grade transition is more smooth. We're in the middle of revising our advisory program, really focusing on the social emotional, the sense of belonging. And you don't get to see this data, but it's up like 22% of students feeling they belong to the high school. They have that eagle spirit. That's what we want. To your specific question, we have an MTSS system, a tier 1, 2, and 3. So when a student is not on track, there is several different options that are actually put in place. And it's individualized based on, all right, so at tier 2, it's a more group approach, where if it's a student that's on what we call a tier 3, then they're getting that individualized, there's a wraparound team, hey, what do we need, what's the barriers? That could look very different. Like one of the things that we put in place this year is we have tutoring supports before school, after school, and during lunch that students can access. And then a lot of these are actually culturally specific. That's brand new this year based on student input. Give you a perfect example. Our PI students said, hey, we need this. We can't come after school. We can't become before school. What we really need is lunchtime. We want to have a mix of tutoring that is both, hey, peer tutors, because sometimes I don't want to ask an adult. I'm a teenager. I'd rather have a teenager explain it to me. And then sometimes it's we want to get an adult, and then we want to get to an adult that understands us. And so we actually have culturally specific tutors that are working with students. And so oftentimes that is put in there. Other examples of that could be we are in the middle of actually offering original credit after school, putting new programs in place. So a student that needs to make up credits can now, hopefully by January, will actually be able to take an after-school class and actually make up those classes. Other examples of this are like social emotional friendship groups. It really depends on what the student needs. So back to your original question, yes, it's figuring out what the barriers for that particular student, wrapping around support, and then helping them. And then as you saw, we're showing improvement, and it's working, continuing to work towards improving, because if they have a really good ninth grade year, they have a great high school experience. And this, all the data shows that it is this that makes the, we're right now in the middle of looking at a book. This is their breakthrough year. This is the year that makes and breaks students, and so it's figuring all that out. So yes, we're trying to figure out what that looks like for that individual supports to really help make sure that all means all for all of our students.
That was the book that you had recommended, Vice Chair Shields, The Make or Break Year.
That's where I got it from, just so you know. Yes.
Yep. Just why ODE selected third grade reading, eighth grade math, and ninth grade on track as some critical measures, because there's a lot of research pointing to these critical moments or critical indicators as being predictors of graduation and post-secondary success. So it's, yeah. So there's some significant work being done, and it varies depending on students' needs and strengths.
And cultural specifics. And then when we look at it, sort of like what the point you're making, we break it down, I mean, to demographics, and then we cross-reference, like social, emotional, or, free reduced lunch, ELD has an IEP, and then we try to get to that granular level, because that's the only way that we could really get the focus we need.
Yeah. Thank you. Hey, you may want to stay for the next one. All right, so I think this is the second to last slide. Yes. So this slide shows the percentage of students on track towards four-year graduation, which is annual, so we won't have a column for this year until later on in the year. And once we clean up the data and such, that data might not even actually be ready until the fall of 2025. It just depends. And then the fifth year high school or fifth year completion rate, which we are currently tracking through successful course completion.
So that will be updated every
That will be updated every term, yes. All right. So once again, this report provides you with the current update on the actions and progress towards our Roadmap 27 excellence targets. Again, the same information is available on the website for viewing and pointing people to as they have questions and you interact with the public. We'll also be further improving the structure of the Roadmap 27 webpage to increase visibility and knowledge that these reports are even there. Right now, it requires you to scroll all the way down to the bottom before you're able to see that there are excellence targets, and I'd like to elevate that and ensure that someone who taps into the Roadmap 27 page can actually see some of the major components of Roadmap 27, and they know that they can actually see these quarterly reports there. That concludes my update. Yeah.
I just have a comment, and I don't need an answer to this tonight, but something that just, it's been sticking with me for quite some time. I'm having trouble understanding how our graduation rate is 67.5 for 4-year, 5 years at 74.1. But as far as meeting state standards, our math at grade 11 is 13.8%, and our English language is 35.8%. How are these kids graduating if they can't meet the state standards? And like I said, I don't necessarily need an answer, but eventually we need an answer.
Yeah, I think it would be good to get Principal Miller in on this because he's on the ground with it. And there is a distinction between the Smarter Balanced assessments that are administered in 11th grade and the achievement on those and graduation, which reflects different components than the Smarter Balanced results. But there is a glaring discrepancy between those assessment results and what we would perceive to be readiness for the world, whatever that choice is. Do you have any quick hits on that, Principal Miller? I know it's a big question.
Yeah,
Did a
we
great job.
can start going into the deeper conversation of this. and I've actually heard you guys talk about it, one test and the OSATs, is that the measure that really measures the student's success? Or is it the portrait of a graduate? And so yes, what you're talking about is you would ideally like to see all the assessments that we do on a student and all the different data points line up. And that's the deeper conversation that we need to have.
Mixed in with ODE requirements around graduation, credits in certain subject areas, minimum credits earned, courses passed, et cetera, right? So, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. This is super helpful. I'm really excited to get this in front of us. It definitely helps, this conversation has been super helpful in realizing what we want to have a lens to and what we need to have a lens to. I think that, this is a great start. The one thing I would ask, and I'm sure that this is probably part of your process, is that as you are going through this, if there are huge jumps somewhere, I think that I would love to recognize that, right? Like, so if there's something that here you had just said something about how when we look at, I feel like I belong at school, that was a pretty big jump, right? So, I mean, where can we find ways to celebrate the little or big wins along the way, knowing that this is going to be a long process?
I'm glad you mentioned that because during our data summit, there were a number of schools looking at their survey results in particular, noting significant gains in terms of students' perception and responses to some of those questions. So those are worth celebrating, and I anticipate we'll see some significant growth.
Great, I'm gonna go and grab my microphone back. The one that I have is just, I can't deal with the feedback.
I thought you were going to be on the go with the...
Yeah, I'm gonna level up this time and do my report standing. All right, greetings, board members. I know we've had a late night. This is a medium-sized report, and I'll try to use a perky pace as well. It's my pleasure and privilege to share with you this update about happenings in the school district. Last year, Centennial reinstituted the District Equity Leadership Team, which was composed of representatives from each school, including community partners, students, and parents, and a board liaison. And that board liaison was our Vice Chair, Pam Shields. That work continues this year with school building representatives with a focus on supporting equity-based professional learning. This team will serve in partnership with the future District Equity Committee, which will be composed of community partners, students, and parents and staff. So as I just mentioned there will be two tracks. One will be more faculty related and one will incorporate other constituents as well. More information about the District Equity Committee will be provided at the January board meeting. On Thursday, November 14th, the District Equity Committee held their first meeting at the district office. Pictures you see on the screen are from last year, so there weren't pictures to put, so I recycled some old ones. During this meeting, the committee was provided an overview of their work for the year and provided input into the district-wide equity professional learning that each staff member will be engaged with this year. At the next committee meeting tomorrow, December 12th, this work will continue with planning and facilitation of the district-wide equity professional learning using the equity modules developed in collaboration with the Education Northwest and Oregon Department of Education. Remaining dates for the District Equity Leadership Team are the ones reflected here on the screen, and you can see that they are just about monthly. This was just mentioned in the previous report. On Thursday, December 5th, Centennial held our Fall Data Summit, the first of our 3 summits for the 24-25 school year. This process is a critical part of the work within Roadmap 27 and is conducted to monitor the impact of our strategies on student learning, allowing us to adjust and improve instructional practices and systems. During the Data Summit, representative school leadership team members engaged in a structured, reflective process that involved the review and analysis of student data and professional practices aligned to the school improvement plans and also the Roadmap 27 goals. Teams identified strengths, areas of celebration, and areas of need, followed by the development of a responsive action plan. The intent is to review the impact of that action plan during the Winter Data Summit, which is scheduled for March. And in the coming weeks, each team's respective staff will conduct follow-up engagement using similar processes at their own school sites, ensuring the relevance of the data review work at all schools. This morning, along with Reynolds Superintendent Frank Carpello and Government Affairs Administrator Stacy Michelson, I met with Gresham Mayor Travis Stovall, and amongst the topics we discussed were our East County legislative agenda, ways to enhance our youth violence prevention efforts, and then also the enterprise zone agreement for businesses that the board took action on to approve earlier this fall. We have quarterly meetings scheduled with the mayor, and this was the 3rd such meeting, and it's nice to be able to have that regular cadence to meet with him. I mentioned this in my weekly email to the board, but I think it's worth noting for the board here and then also for the community as well. This past week, we received confirmation from the City of Portland that our joint proposal with other Portland school districts for the Portland Clean Energy Fund, affectionately known as PCEF, dollars is being recommended for collaborative for climate action funding. They anticipate making 8 awards and are recommending funding for our joint project at roughly $70.4 million. Last night, Director of Business and Operations Paul Southerton was on hand as Portland Public Schools and Government Affairs Administrator Stacy Michelson gave a brief presentation to the PCEF Advisory Committee. Unfortunately, Director Southerton was not utilized, but he did get to attend. Next week on December 18th, Portland City Council will vote to approve the final awards. This will be the last meeting of the current council and will be one of the first meetings in the newly updated council chamber. Districts will receive a proportionate share of the grant award based on the student enrollment numbers, not the average daily membership this time, just the student enrollment numbers. The total funding for Centennial is estimated to be 10% of the grant award, so about $7 million. And that is in addition to the $4.6 million in PSET funding that Centennial was recently awarded over the next 5 years for capital improvements, which include replacement of equipment at the end of its useful life with new energy efficient equipment, reduction of energy consumption and greenhouse gases emission in our Portland schools, mechanical cooling improvements to combat the effects of a changing climate on our student learning environments, decarbonization of district vehicles, which will involve the electric buses and fleet vehicles, and enhancing tree canopies on school grounds. Should these additional funds materialize, specific scopes of work given the final funding would be sorted out in the new year as contracts are put in place. That being said, combined with our initial allocation of funding, we anticipate being able to fully replace heating, ventilation, and air conditioning or HVAC equipment at several of our schools located within the city of Portland over the next several years, which would include high efficiency equipment that would reduce energy consumption during heating season, the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions at our Portland schools, and the provision of cooling during warmer months, so we wouldn't have to consider canceling school on high heat days. Needless to say, this is a historical investment that will have a lasting positive impacts both on our students as well as the environment, and I know that Director Southerton has put some work into getting us to this stage, so appreciation to him. This week, or last week, Governor Kotek released her recommended budget for the 25-27 biennium. Positives include an upgrade to how the current service level, or CSL, is calculated moving forward. We spoke to that earlier in the meeting. In that, increasing the CSL number by $600 million for 25-27, including $85 million to true up finalized PERS increases that Director Southerton spoke of before. The total state school fund allocation in the recommended budget is 11.36 billion, and that is an increase of nearly 1.2 billion from the current biennium. There are some items of particular note for K-12, and before I share those, a nifty way to ballpark Centennial's portion is that 1% of any dollar amount I share with you for the statewide figure is what Centennial would project to receive. So some of the highlights are 127 million in additional investment in early literacy, 100 million of which will go to school districts. So how much would that be for Centennial? That would be 1 million would go to Centennial additional over that 2-year biennium, which would then equate to $500,000 per year. 75 million for some, I'm going to quiz you after each, no, I'm not. 75 million for summer learning split between the summer of 25 and 26. Director Harden, I hear you. Paul's checking over there to make sure you're right. 649.9 million, couldn't get to 650. 649.9 million total funds for capital investments, 340.8 million for high school success, 127.3 million for hunger-free schools program grants, which has been beneficial to us for being able to provide meals across the board. 25.7 million to expand education and training pathways to enhance the behavioral health workforce, and 5.1 million in new lottery bonding authority to leverage federal funds for the Connecting Oregon Schools broadband program. Without going into detail about the legislative process, do know that this is only the start, as you know, with more developments and information to come. A hard copy of the previously mentioned East County legislative agenda is here for your reference, and more information about advocacy strategy for 2025 will be shared over the course of the upcoming legislative session. Speaking of advocacy strategy, this next Tuesday, along with the superintendents of Park Rose, David Douglas, and Reynolds School Districts, I have the opportunity to meet with State Representative Andrea Valderrama and her staff to share our East County priorities in advance of the 2025 legislative session. Similar to the recent meeting with State Senator Chris Gorsuch, the format will be the superintendent and one board member from each East County school district. And thank you to Director Lynn for accompanying me during our session with Senator Gorsuch. So far, I have not had any takers for the meeting with Representative Valderrama, so if you have any interest and availability, we are scheduled for next Tuesday, December 17th at 5:30. It will be a virtual meeting, so if you're interested and available, please let me know, ideally before we are finished this evening. On a final note, I want to share with our board and our community a wish for each of you to have a happy holiday season. The end of a year and the start of a new one brings with it opportunities for reflection, hope, and gratitude. As a learning community, we have accomplished much in 2024 and are looking forward to even more in 2025. So please accept my wishes for a break filled with special moments, and I know not all of you are able to have a traditional winter break as we do in schools. Nevertheless, I hope that you are able to take time to relax, recharge, connect with those that you care about, and enjoy the holiday season. And with that, I invite any questions or comments you might have, and that concludes my superintendent's report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Owens. Are there any questions or comments? Fantastic. Do folks feel like we can forego a break to continue? We had a good break earlier. Excellent. So next up, we've got confirmation items. Can I get a motion to approve all of the confirmation items?
We have to approve confirmation items as listed.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. I'm looking at Will because he's joined us virtually, so I wasn't sure if he was voting or not.
I will.
Fantastic. Those have passed. Am I looking at the right agenda that says there's not really any board action items today?
Yes, you are.
Well, fantastic. Is there anything else for the good of the order? Future, we still want to talk about future agenda items. Yes.
Future agenda items, what I have written down here is athletic recognition for fall athletes. We have the student recognition that Principal Miller and I talked about as well, so
Okay.
that's forthcoming. We probably won't have any for the January meeting, but hopefully soon thereafter. The Equity Advisory Committee, which was different than the Equity Leadership Team that I had mentioned, and Dr. Katsuda has a report that she intends to share with us. We also have slated the creation of a classroom textbook equipment and furniture fund, and so that's something that Director Southerton is working on, is a note for the potential establishment of that. I would also say, and this is not for the next board meeting agenda, but we are going to be initiating the profile of a graduate work that I had outlined this summer in terms of articulating what that means for our community. So that will consist of committee meetings and then also community forums, and that will be starting to hit hard in January and February. So I thought that was worth noting as well, and more information to come.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else floating under anybody's radar? Anything for the good of order? All right, it is 9:12 and we are adjourned. Thank you.